Alabama Power, we've been in the business of planning for electric load growth for over 100 years. It's not really a new concept for us, but over those 100 plus years, there are always new technologies that pop up. So electric vehicles are simply just a new variable in that equation. And we look at the forecasted load growth, and then we make sure that we're prepared for it.
Electric vehicles, or EVs, are helping Alabamians go the distance. EVs are more powerful, more practical, and more cost-effective than you think. EVs are also driving our state's economic growth. Welcome to the Drive Electric Alabama podcast, where we plug you in to everything you need to know about EVs in the state of Alabama. This podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's You're in Charge EV incentive programs. To learn more about these programs, go to alabamapower.com/EV. I'm your host, Cedric Daniels, and EVs have been a big part of my work and personal life for decades. I'm the former Chief Strategy Officer for a Birmingham-based company called Streamline, involved with program management and consultation for clean transportation. Before that, I worked as the electric vehicle marketing manager at Alabama Power Company. Thanks for tuning in with us today. As the electric vehicle, that's EV population grows and grows and grows, range anxiety still exists. That is, am I going to run out of electric energy and be stranded? Or just the same difference, am I going to run out of gasoline and be stranded? So no one wants to have range anxiety when it comes to electric vehicles. Now, you've heard in the past from ADECA, that's Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs, and Director Kenneth Boswell. And you've heard from ACFC, Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition, and Michael Staley is their president, about their goal to educate and advocate for electric vehicle adoption in Alabama. And thank goodness they're doing some great work for us. We also spoke with Blake Hardwick, Executive Director of Energy Institute of Alabama, and Houston Smith, Vice President of Governmental Affairs at Alabama Power, about funding. Everything takes money to get more infrastructure and charging stations installed. In this episode, we will have a great discussion on infrastructure, that's charging stations, advancements, and charging stations installations in Alabama. And today, from a utility standpoint, we have two great guests that I know and admire and respect a lot. Drew Fry, Electric Vehicles Manager at TVA, or Tennessee Valley Authority, and Justin Harrison, Distribution, Grid Transformation, and Planning Manager at Alabama Power Company. So Drew, let's start with you. So how is TVA, your utility, preparing for this infrastructure, that's charging stations, etc., for the demands of electric vehicle adoption? And that's today. We'll talk about tomorrow later.
Yeah, Cedric. So my team here at TVA works on supporting customers who might be thinking about buying an electric vehicle as their next purchase. And we do this through removing the biggest barriers that they face when they're considering an electric vehicle. So we've done a lot of research and talked to industry experts and car owners and automakers, charging companies. And we've come up with kind of the biggest barriers to folks thinking about buying an electric vehicle. And they're really the charging infrastructure. Where am I going to charge this thing? Vehicle availability and choice, having an electric vehicle that fits my lifestyle. Policies and supportive programs that help me get into an electric vehicle, as well as consumer education and awareness, just the basic understanding of how the technology works and how it would fit into my life. And so we kind of focus on these four big areas with our programs. And we help build charging stations in our communities, educate our consumers about the technology, and work with automakers and policy makers to have more vehicles here supported by different programs and incentives. So working to remove these barriers, we think it'll be a lot more attractive for folks to think about buying an electric vehicle as their next vehicle.
That's a lot, Drew. So you and your team never sleep, sounds like. Now, when I come to you, Justin, the same question. Today at Alabama Power Company, what are you doing to prepare for the electric vehicles currently?
Yeah, for sure. You know, Cedric, I have to start off by saying I'm a big fan of your work, so this is fun for me to be here today. Now, what's interesting about the electric power industry today is it's in a time of transition, and it's not just in one phase of our industry. It's in all three phases, from generation, how we make the power, to transmission, how we move it, and then the distribution system to get it out to the end users. And what we do on my team is we have this big team of really talented people, and each of those people, they see the world through a different lens. So my job is to pull that team together, and we have to create this one cohesive vision of what does the grid of the future look like? And you have to take that kind of theoretical, philosophical idea and turn that into something that's real and practical and actionable. So that's fun for a bunch of engineers, right? Now, along the way, we always find these tricky challenges, problems that have to be solved, questions that have to be answered. So that's when it's really important for us to have this North Star, this direction of our compass, so that we know that the direction we're headed is the right way. And that compass for us is that we always want to provide our customers with safe, clean, affordable, and reliable power. If we are doing that, then I know we're headed in the right direction.
Oh, also great stuff, Justin, and audience. So you hear now, especially about the complexity in some cases of this grid conversation and infrastructure. So keep in mind, you have to have the energy to do almost everything in life, and including having obviously electric energy for EVs. That's the juice that empowers it. So make sure you stay actively involved with this podcast to learn from these subject matter experts. So back to you now, Drew. So now let's go ahead and go toward the future. We know that there's going to be lots more of these possible electric vehicles, especially when I see these fabulous commercials. There's some cool stuff out there, and I'm sure there's going to be more and more of those coming in the future. So therefore, when I think about businesses and I think about tomorrow, can you tell us, what are you doing now to prepare for the future at TVA?
Yeah, so this is a very important question for utility companies like TVA and Alabama Power. So it's important to know what TVA is doing to prepare for the adoption of EVs, to understand what kind of utility TVA is. So we are what we call a generation and transmission power company. So we operate the power plants and the big transmission lines that distribute electricity across states and big regions. And we deliver that electricity to local power companies who actually bring that to your house or your business or ultimately your vehicle. We have 153 local power companies, 25 of them in northern Alabama, who are municipal and electric cooperatives, and they operate the power lines that actually get electricity to your home. So from a TVA perspective, we really think high level, big picture. We think about the power plants and the transmission lines. So it's important for us to know how our power system is evolving, how energy usage is growing, who is moving to the Tennessee Valley, what businesses are locating there, because that ultimately corresponds to how much energy we need to produce and transmit across our region. So for years now, we've included EV adoption in our load forecasting, which we do multiple times a year, and into our longer term plans, which we call integrated resource plans or IRPs. So we're preparing for EV adoption when we're taking into account how our area is growing in energy use. It's important for us to stay on top of that. TVA is such a large power company. We cover parts of 7 states, nearly 80,000 square miles, and almost 10 million customers take TVA power through local power companies. So we keep track of all sorts of things that are going on. The adoption of electric vehicles, especially in the near to midterm, is really just a small fraction of the TVA power system. It takes about 500,000 electric vehicles to equal just 1% of TVA's energy needs. And there's about 50,000 electric vehicles in our service territory now. So that is something that's definitely easy for us to accommodate in the near term, but it's something we continually plan for, especially over the longer term. When we start to think about maybe 20, 30, 50% of all new vehicles being electric, that starts to add up over time.
So thanks, Drew. Audience, as I hear it, the TVA is planning for near term and long term. And that word planning is what I've heard a lot from both Drew, you, and Justin. And so thank you for that planning that you're doing, because we know that things constantly are changing. So Justin, as I go to Alabama Power Company, and especially in your role, since grid is within your name, and talking about the distribution planning and all of those circumstances, when you think about all of this evolution of what's happening in tomorrow, what's the growth of electric vehicles, is there a comparison between today and this technology of EVs and maybe in the past, the distant past, air conditioning being adopted? So explain to us how Alabama Power Company is really looking far out there, just like TVA, for the long term.
Yeah, Cedric, that's a really good point. My perspective and Drew's perspective, they're very complementary of one another. So where TVA is focusing primarily on generation and transmission, my role is to focus on the distribution system. And what that means is that's the part of the grid that connects the end-use customers to the substation, right? And Alabama Power, we've been in the business of planning for electric load growth for over 100 years. It's not really a new concept for us, but over those 100 plus years, there are always new technologies that pop up. 60 years ago, 70, 80 years ago, not everybody had an air conditioner. So we at the power company, we had to figure out how to serve new air conditioning load. And if you back up the clock even further past that, you can look at farmhouses in the 1930s that were adding refrigerators and washing machines. So electric vehicles are simply just a new variable in that equation. And we look at the forecasted load growth, and then we make sure that we're prepared for it. But when I think about electric vehicles, there are really three interesting concepts that set EVs apart from some of your typical electric load. And the first thing is that EV charging, it's not like a toaster. A toaster is either on or it's off. When you charge an electric vehicle, you can adjust the flow of energy to that vehicle to speed up or slow down charging, sort of like using a dimmer switch on a light, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is electric vehicles, they aren't like a hairdryer where you only use a hairdryer when your hair is wet, right? You can't schedule that. But scheduling is something that you can do with electric vehicles. With a simple app on your phone, you can schedule that charging activity to happen at really whatever time you want. And then lastly, the third thing that's unique about electric vehicles, I want you to think about electricity like water flowing through a pipe. Let's say that you want to fill up a swimming pool and you want to run a hot shower and you want to wash some dishes all at the same time. If you want to do all of those things at the same time, you're going to need a really big pipe for all that water, right? But if you decide to schedule filling up the pool while you're asleep and you can dial back the flow of water to that pool while your dishwasher is running, you can get by with a much smaller pipe. And the same is true for electricity. We call this concept demand management. So I want to make it clear that we can definitely support new EV charging load, particularly in the near term. And as we get into the medium term, we can use technology, we can use data, we can minimize the upgrades that are needed to the grid through demand management. And the neat thing for me as an engineer is this is really one part engineering and one part consumer behavior. So it's a fun puzzle to figure out.
So the big pipe that you mentioned, how does that impact most customers, especially residential customers or business customers? Does that mean that it's going to be a bigger investment for the whole community and everyone connected with that utility for more cost? Or to use it that way? Is that the outcome? Is that what you're speaking of?
So the neat thing about this is if we do it in a smart way, then we don't have to upgrade the grid as much, right? We can schedule charging. We can dial up and dial down the speed that you charge your vehicle so that we don't have to upgrade the grid nearly as much. Everything is connected in our lives today. And the same thing is going to be true for our vehicles. We want to leverage that technology to do things in a smart way so we can work smarter and not harder. How about that?
Yeah, that smarter sounds like we save money. So, Drew, I'm going to go ahead and move to you with the same question.
Yes, absolutely. So Justin introduced a really important and interesting concept that is electric vehicles. At the heart of it, it's a battery on wheels. And batteries don't really care when they're charged necessarily. They just need to be charged to do what they were made to do. And so, the ability to charge at different times and have your vehicle ready to go for your driving, but do so in a way that allows utility companies to prepare for the future and really encourage and integrate a bunch of electric vehicles is something that utility companies are heavily looking at. It's a way to do things smarter, not harder.
Yeah, that's exactly what I need to hear, because we're going to hit it home now. When I say home, I'm literally talking about residential customers and charging at home. And we all want to do it better and smarter. So to you, Drew, tell us about what TVA is doing when it comes to people charging at home. That's that residential customer. And what is this challenge like for the customer and for TVA?
Yeah, absolutely. Charging at home or the place where you reside, or even to some extent your workplace, these opportunities to charge at those locations where your vehicle is parked either overnight or long periods of time are really what makes electric vehicles different from gasoline-powered vehicles. We understand home charging is very important for EV drivers. As I mentioned before, we work with 153 local power companies, 25 of them in northern Alabama, that actually deliver and serve electricity to consumers' homes. So we're kind of one step removed from your home electric service. But we work with those local power companies to offer solutions for your home charging needs. Over 80% of your charging happens at home when you have access to EV charging. So it is really your primary source of very reliable charging. And so it's important for you to have safe and reliable charging access at your home. Through the TVA New Homes program, we incentivize new home builders to go ahead and pre-wire your home for EV charging in the future. Whether you have an electric vehicle now or maybe the homeowner after you will have an electric vehicle. When you can do that during the building and the design of the house, it's really a fraction of the cost. It can save hundreds, even up to thousands of dollars compared to coming back and actually retrofitting and adding a 240 volt, what we call level 2 charging stations. That's one way that we encourage access to home charging. We also work with local power companies to offer options to consumers to ensure that they're charging at the most economical times for them and the most economical times for the local power company and TVA. So, as Justin and I were just talking about, batteries on wheels can charge and at any time as long as they're ready to go in the morning, and utility companies have excess power during off-peak hours. And so those two can go hand in hand if we have the programs and the electricity rates that encourage the right charging behavior.
Oh, thanks, Drew. That sounds like some great programs. Now, you've referred a couple of times to the 25 utilities within Alabama. And can you give us a couple of examples of geographically some of those?
Yes, absolutely. So those would be utility companies like Huntsville Utilities or the Coleman Electric Cooperative or Florence Utilities. So municipal, city-owned, or cooperative customer-owned utilities kind of north of Coleman up to the Tennessee line.
Great. Thank you. So, Justin, same kind of question. Of course, we're talking about residential as home, single-family home charging. And what is Alabama Power Company doing to face that same challenge?
Sure. So let's start with the good news. And the good news is that customers have lots of different options and they can use different combinations of these options to charge their vehicles at home. Now, the bad news is also that they have lots of options. So you have to figure out these options, right? So I would say that the first step, if you are thinking about adding an EV charger in your home, is you need to reach out to a licensed electrician. No two homes are the same. You need an electrician to come in and look at the equipment. We in the business, we call it behind the meter, right? It's on the customer's side. The homeowner actually owns that equipment. And that's really for the homeowner and an electrician to evaluate and look at. But I mentioned the options that customers have. you really can choose how quickly you want that vehicle to charge. And the faster you want it to charge, then the larger the charger will be that you'll need to install. And the larger that charger is, then the more capacity you need in your electric panel in your home. So when you and your electrician look at that electric panel, you may decide that you have capacity there to do what you want to do to charge the vehicle, in which case we, the utility, don't really have to be involved. You're just wiring up something new inside your house, and you can go on about your business. Now, if you and your electrician do decide that you need to upgrade your panel, that's when you definitely need to reach out to the local utility. And at that point, a utility engineer will come out to your house and assess the situation and determine maybe if some of the equipment on the utility side of the meter might need to be upgraded as well. And in either case, I would encourage any customer to go out and research their local utility's website, look for incentives, look for charging rates. They're out there. Alabama Power, for example, we have a $500 rebate to customers who install a level 2 charger in their home. We also have a special nighttime charging rate. We talked about demand management earlier and how that's a consumer behavior challenge and opportunity for us. Well, we have a rate out there that encourages customers to charge off-peak at night. So there are lots of opportunities out there to really custom build what you want to do in your house and how you do it. The last note there, be sure to remember that anytime you do anything in your home, work with that electrician, and it could be that you need to get an electrical inspection from a local municipality. You just need to check that box and make sure that you cover that.
So Justin, as I think about the cost and the complexity or lack of complexity in installing this in a home, if I wanted to put in an electric dryer, or if I wanted to put in an electric water heater, for example, in my home, or electric oven for the first time and didn't have it before, is this kind of similar if you wanted to put a charging station in your home with your conversations with electricians, et cetera? Is it very similar to that?
Absolutely. It's just new load. I have one in my own home, and we just wired up. It looks like a dryer plug in the garage, and we can hook an electric vehicle into that and charge right up. And the local utility didn't have to be involved because I had capacity in my electric panel in my house.
Thanks a whole lot, Justin. So thinking, Drew, of residential installations when it comes to charging stations, though, so there's a lot of times for all of us, including me, I search stuff on the internet to try to get the best deal possible. And in this case, though, when it comes to charging stations, are all charging stations basically the same kind of quality, or are there any safety concerns that anyone needs to consider when they are selecting that home charging station?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, not all charging stations are created equal. So luckily, there's many vendors and many options of charging stations that are out there that are both economical and safe. But the number one thing everyone is concerned with, and what we want to see, is to be sure that the charging system and the installation is done properly and as safe as possible. So TVA has an online marketplace where we have different Energy Star electric vehicle charging stations that you can browse, and some that you can purchase directly from the website or through other retailers. But no matter what charging station you pick and where you purchase it, it's extremely important that the charging station is certified safe from a testing laboratory. So when you look at charging stations, you'll see a sticker on certified equipment that identifies the nationally recognized testing laboratory that completed all of the UL Underwriters Laboratory safety testing. So that certification ensures that the equipment has been tested rigorously for safety. You can look for Energy Star certification as well, because every Energy Star certified charging station is required to be certified to the UL standards as well. So that's another way that you can find quality equipment. And once you decide on the charging station, it's equally important that you have a licensed electrician that has experience in this field to do the installation. There's a whole section of the National Electric Code that gives the rules and procedure for installing these charging stations so that we'll ensure everything is as safe as possible when you're charging your electric vehicle.
So if I'm looking on the web, or if I go to a big box store, Should I always look for those types of certifications, or should I assume because it's on the web or it's at one of my favorite store locations that it's already certified?
Now, never assume anything, especially when you can buy online from everywhere. You definitely got a lot of options with some American made and overseas equipment, but it's super important to look for that testing and that certification mark. That's what it's there for.
Thanks a lot, Drew. So as we talk about infrastructure for our residential customers, let's take this opportunity to remind you that Drive Electric Alabama podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's Home Charging Rebate Program. You can get $500. Let me repeat that. $500 when you purchase and install a level 2 charger. That's the one that is basically a 220 type of outlet, or just like a stove would have if it's electric, or a dryer would have if it's electric, or a hot water heater. That's what a level 2 charger can be, and this is for your home. And if you want more information about that, please check the show notes or go to alabamapower.com/EV. Now back to the facts. So thank you both for all this valuable information regarding residential and single-family homes. Justin, can you tell us about Alabama Power being able to handle all of the EVs? When I think of businesses, and all of us do, they have many, many cars, many trucks, and they're big, small, and all types of sizes, and buses, etc. So when it comes to that, how is Alabama Power Company addressing what's going to be the possibility for the much larger loads, especially if it's at a specific site as compared to a single family home?
Now, as far as commercial charging is concerned, I think it's really important for consumers to understand the difference between level 1, level 2, and level 3 charging. And we've already touched on it here in this discussion, but let's make sure that we clarify those points. So level 1 charging is just a standard wall outlet that you might already have in your garage. Level 2 charging is a 240 volt outlet that's a dryer plug, an RV hookup. From level 2 charging, you can recharge a typical electric vehicle from close to empty in about 8 hours. Then we get to commercial. That's going to be level 3 charging. That's what we call DC fast charging. If you've ever driven around and you've seen a big box retail store or a convenience store, you'll see these DC fast chargers because they look very much like gasoline pumps. You can hook into one of these and top off in 20 to 30 minutes, typically, off of a level 3 DC fast charger. But from the utility perspective, the thing to understand about level 3 DC fast charging is one single port. So I'm not talking about the entire station. I'm just talking about one plug-in at a DC fast charging station has the same electrical load as an entire fast food restaurant. So when you start thinking about 4, 6, 8 of these chargers all in a very concentrated area, that's a lot of load, right? So it's so important for commercial customers who think that they want to install DC fast chargers. It is so important for those customers to communicate with us as early as possible. And the good news is that we are experienced serving these level 2 and level 3 chargers. So our field engineers are very familiar with the different types of loads and chargers, and we want to work with our customers to make sure that they get what they need.
Thanks a lot, Justin. And audience, I keep hearing from both Drew and Justin the reference to good news, and that's really a compliment to their expertise and to what TVA and Alabama Power Company is doing to help us be successful, whether we're a business or whether we're at home. I like hearing that reference to good news. So, Drew, along the same lines, with business and its charging stations and infrastructure, can you give us some examples of maybe the types of customers and locations that are wanting this level 2 and even DC fast charger, the much larger power, and what are the challenges facing you as a utility and maybe that they encounter when they have to add those types of significant loads as a business?
Yeah, so in Northern Alabama, we've been working very closely with local power companies to help build public fast charging infrastructure. We have 10 projects with local power companies, either complete or underway right now in Northern Alabama. And they're locating those chargers along interstates and U.S. and state highways really the roads that connect all of our communities together. And local power companies have been working with commercial customers on where to put those charging stations. So you think about fast food restaurants, other types of restaurants, shopping centers, town squares, even downtowns in cities like Fort Payne, Alabama, and others are building this charging infrastructure to bring EV drivers in to charge your vehicle, but to also see what's in town, to grab a bite to eat, to do some shopping. We see a lot of the same locations that you might see gas pumps, so big box stores, interstate exits, and things like that. On the commercial side, we've been working with a handful of commercial customers who are evaluating electrifying their own business fleet of vehicles. So that's much different than you and I buying one or two electric vehicles and taking it home and plugging it into maybe a regular 110 volt outlet or getting that dryer plug installed for a level 2 charging station. When these businesses are thinking about electrifying, they're thinking about buying 20, 50, even hundreds of vehicles at a time. And they could be small sedans or SUVs, or they could be much larger delivery vans and school buses. So we've seen companies like the Postal Service, city transit buses, school systems, and school buses all looking at electrifying it, and everything's a little bit different. Some of them might be able to use level 2 charging like we would in our garage. So maybe they park for long periods of time. So you really have to work with each commercial customer and understand kind of the charging needs that their vehicles will actually need. And then the charging infrastructure that will support their needs. And so the faster the charging, the higher power the charging. Justin talked a little bit about what utilities have to do, and we have to find the electrical capacity and bring the right size pipe to that business to handle all of their charging. And so that takes planning and that takes time, but it is something that a lot of folks are very heavily interested in doing. It saves them money on their operational costs. It's better for the environment, and really kind of helps with electrifying transportation and everything in our world.
So both of you have talked about some of the challenges, but you've also talked about the great news that you both can provide for your different local utilities. And that's fabulous for our audience and for all of us who have a business or for a home. But one thing came across loud and clear, an audience, not just in this conversation with Justin and Drew, but when I've heard them speak many times before. And that message is, please contact your local utility as soon as you begin thinking about the possibility of having electric vehicles of any type and needing to have charging stations. So whether it's for your home or business, the important thing is to work with those local utilities. You heard the programs that's available to you, and you also heard the opportunities to maybe learn something about how to face some of those challenges as soon as possible. Audience, again, I want to emphasize that please contact your local utility. It's now time for a segment where we separate fact from fiction when it comes to EVs. This is brought to you by the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. There's a myth out there that says the grid can't cope with millions of EVs. But the truth is, the acceleration of EV adoption will not reach any sort of tipping point where charging EVs will overwhelm the electric grid. Alabama is accustomed to handling the heavy load of heating and cooling throughout the year, and the grid is well equipped to handle the incremental load associated with EV adoption. All right, let's go back to the conversation. Thanks a ton, Drew and Justin, as always, educational and learning. So what is the one thing that you want our listeners to remember about Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, and Alabama Power Company, APC, as it's commonly called sometimes, and its impact on the EV industry in Alabama? So, Drew, I'm going to start with you, please.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to remember is that utility companies have been and are planning for EV adoption. And we want to be partners in helping you get the most out of the electricity that you use every day. So both Alabama Power and local power companies served by TVA, while we may have different programs, we're really here to help you learn about what it would take to get an electric vehicle for yourself, in your home, or in your business. And we have different programs and incentives to help you do just that. So reaching out to your local utility company to understand what they have and to learn more is an important first step.
Thanks, Drew. So, Justin, same question, takeaways on the EV industry that you'd like to leave the audience with.
Well, I think Drew put it really well. So I would echo everything that he just said. And I would add that from an Alabama Power standpoint, it's important for us. We make it a priority to listen to our customers, and we intend to be prepared to meet their needs, right? So for those customers who choose to transition to electric vehicles, we want to make that process as easy as possible. Sometimes we talk about the 3 A's: advise, advocate, and advance. We want to advise our customers, advocate for our customers, and we want to advance new technologies which will make life better for our customers, for our company, and for the state of Alabama.
So thanks a ton again, Drew and Justin. You deserve all types of applause and praise from me. Audience, this has been phenomenal when it comes to me going nationally across this country as I have and hearing from people about this topic. You've just heard from 2 of the leaders in these topical areas. So we've got a lot that we can admire about them advocating for us. Now, it's true that electric vehicle infrastructure, that's charging stations, is getting better and better here in Alabama. And gentlemen, you two and your teams are a part of the reasons why. In the next episode, we're going to talk about electric vehicle production. My co-host, Michael Staley, will be speaking with Robert Burns, Chief Administrative Officer and Vice President of Hyundai Motor Manufacturing of Alabama. Stay tuned, and we hope to see you then. The Drive Electric Alabama podcast is brought to you by Alabama Power's You're in Charge EV programs, as well as the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition. The series is co-hosted by me, Cedric Daniels, and Michael Staley. And the podcast is produced by Ingredient. For more information, you can always check the show notes or go to alabamapower.com/EV. Thanks for listening.